The bet was a wildfire and I was the spark. I stood in our cramped Boston apartment, staring at Claire, my roommate, whose icy blue eyes could cut glass when she was mad. "You think you can change me for $200,000? She spat, her voice dripping with disdain, as if the very idea of loving a woman was a sin she'd never entertain. It started at a dive bar on Boylston Street, the kind of place where the jukebox played Springsteen and the beer was cheap. Claire, ever the straight-laced law student, had been dragged along by our mutual friend, Jake, who loved stirring the pot. He'd overheard Claire's rant about keeping things traditional during a heated debate at a campus rally, her small-town Texas roots showing through her polished exterior. Jake, with his devil-may-care grin, proposed the bet, $200,000 from his trust fund if I, Mia Torres, could make Claire fall for me in 6 months. It was absurd, offensive even, but the money was real and I was broke, drowning in student loans and gig economy scraps. Plus, there was something about Claire's rigid certainty that made me want to shake her world. I wasn't just a lesbian, I was a loud one. At 24, I'd spent years owning who I was: curly hair, leather jackets, and a guitar I played at open mics. Claire, 25, was my opposite, buttoned up, blonde, and allergic to anything that challenged her worldview. We'd been roommates for 3 months, thrown together by a Craigslist ad in desperation. She wasn't cruel, but her offhand comments about the gay agenda or unnatural lifestyles stung like paper cuts. Still, I saw cracks in her armor, moments when her eyes lingered on me a second too long, when her laugh softened at my jokes. Could I do this? Could I turn her heart for a bet? That night, after Jake's proposition, I lay on my thrift store couch, staring at the ceiling. The money could change my life, pay off my loans, fund my music, maybe even help my mom back in Puerto Rico. But it wasn't just about the cash. There was something about Claire, something buried under her preacher's daughter facade, that called to me. I wanted to unravel her, not just for the bet, but to see if she could feel what I felt, the pull of something real. The next morning I started small. Claire was in the kitchen brewing coffee, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Hey," I said, leaning against the counter. "You ever try Puerto Rican coffee? It's strong enough to wake the dead." She rolled her eyes but smirked. "I'm fine with Folgers, thanks." I pushed further, offering to make her a cup my way, grinding beans with cinnamon and cloves. She hesitated, then nodded. When she took a sip, her eyes widened. "Okay, that's not terrible," she admitted. I grinned, feeling the first spark catch. Over the next few weeks, I chipped away at her walls. I played my guitar while she studied, letting the notes drift into her space. I'd leave her favorite snack, chocolate-covered almonds, on the counter with notes like, "Don't work too hard, princess." She'd scoff, but she ate them. I invited her to my open mic nights, and though she refused at first, she showed up one evening, sitting in the back with a skeptical frown. When I sang a ballad about love and loss, her eyes didn't leave me. Afterward, she said, "You're not bad," her voice softer than usual. I felt Athena shift like a door creaking open. But Claire wasn't easy. Her upbringing clung to her like damp clothes. One night, after a few beers, she snapped, "You're wasting your time, Mia. I'm not like you." The words hit hard, but I saw the flesh in her cheeks, the way her hands trembled. "Maybe you're not," I said, stepping closer, "but you're not as sure as you think." She stormed off, but the air between us crackled. By month 2, we were dancing around something unspoken. I'd catch her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, when I was cooking, laughing, or sprawled on the couch with my sketchbook. I started leaving her books like Fun Home and Stone Butch Blues on the coffee table. She'd pick them up, flip through a page, then put them down like they burned her. But she kept picking them up. One rainy afternoon, everything changed. We were stuck inside, the city gray and dripping outside our window. I was strumming my guitar, humming a tune, when Claire sat across from me, her law books abandoned. "Why do you care so much?" she asked, her voice low. "About what?" I replied, though I knew. "About this. Me. Whatever you're doing." Her eyes searched mine, vulnerable for the first time. I set my guitar down. "Because I see you, Claire. Not the version you show everyone else. The real you." She didn't pull away when I reached for her hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling, but she let them rest in mine. For a moment we just sat there, the rain drumming on the roof, the world holding its breath. I didn't push her. I didn't need to. The bet was still there looming, but this was something else. Something neither of us could name yet. The rain kept falling, and so did Claire's defenses. That moment on the couch, her hand in mine, lingered like a song stuck in my head. But the next morning, she was back to her old self, distant, her walls rebuilt overnight. "We're not doing this," she said over breakfast, her voice sharp as she stabbed at her eggs. I wanted to argue, but I saw the fear in her eyes. I backed off, knowing pushing too hard would break whatever fragile thing we'd started. Still, I couldn't stop. The bet was a shadow, but my feelings for Claire were becoming the light. I doubled down, not with grand gestures but with small, deliberate ones. I'd cook dinner as con pollo, my mom's recipe, and we'd eat together, her guard lowering with each bite. I'd tell her stories about growing up in San Juan, about the music and the heat, and she'd listen, her eyes softening. One night she even laughed, a real laugh, when I described my disastrous first kiss at a high school dance. "You're ridiculous," she said, but her smile stayed. Claire was a puzzle, and I was piecing her together. She'd grown up in a small Texas town, where church was law and anything outside the norm was whispered about in hushed tones. Her parents, devout and unyielding, had drilled into her a rigid sense of right and wrong. Yet here she was in Boston chasing a law degree, surrounded by people who challenged everything she'd been taught. I saw the conflict in her, the pull between who she was and who she might become. One evening I convinced her to watch a movie with me. I picked Carol, knowing it would hit close to home. As Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara's characters fell into their forbidden love, Claire sat stiffly, her arms crossed. But when the credits rolled, she didn't move. "That's sad," she whispered. "It's not just sad," I said. "It's real. Love like that, it's worth fighting for." She didn't respond, but she didn't leave either. We sat in silence, the weight of the story pressing against us. The bet's deadline loomed, 4 months left, and Jake kept texting, asking for updates. I ignored him. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about Claire, about the way her hand brushed mine when we passed dishes, the way her laugh came easier now. But the money still whispered in the back of my mind. $200,000. Freedom. A future. Could I really walk away from that? Did I even want to? One night at a queer poetry slam in Cambridge, everything shifted again. I dragged Claire along, promising pizza afterward. She sat in the crowd, her arms crossed but her eyes curious. When I took the stage, I read a poem I'd written about her, though I didn't say her name. It was about longing, about seeing someone's truth before they did. The room cheered, but I only saw Claire, her face unreadable but her eyes glistening. After, she pulled me aside in the alley outside. "Was that about me?" she asked, her voice shaking. I nodded, my heart pounding. I don't know what I'm doing." She stepped closer, her breath visible in the cold night air. Then, before I could speak, she kissed me. It was quick, desperate, like she was stealing something she wasn't sure she deserved. My lips burned with the taste of her mint in fear and want. But she pulled back, her eyes wide with panic. "I can't," she whispered and ran back inside. I stood there, the alley spinning, knowing we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. The next week was torture. Claire avoided me, leaving early for classes, coming home late. I gave her space, but it killed me. I kept replaying that kiss, the way her lips had softened against mine. I wanted to tell her it was okay, that she didn't have to be afraid, but she wasn't ready to hear it. So I waited, pouring my frustration into my music, writing songs about her that I'd never play. Then one night she came home drunk. Not sloppy but loose, her guard down. She stumbled into the living room where I was sketching. "Why do you make this so hard?" she slurred, her eyes locked on mine. "Make what hard?" I asked, setting my pencil down. "This," she said, gesturing between us. "You. Me. Everything." She sank onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not supposed to feel this way." I knelt in front of her, my heart breaking. "Claire, you're allowed to feel whatever you feel. No one gets to tell you who you are." She looked at me, her eyes raw, and for the first time I saw her without the armor. She leaned forward and we kissed again, this time slower, deeper, like she was letting herself fall. That second kiss changed everything, but it didn't make things easier. Claire woke up the next morning with a hangover and a wall of regret. "Last night was a mistake," she said, avoiding my eyes as she poured coffee. Her voice was cold, but I saw the tremble in her hands. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to tell her she was lying to herself, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded and left for work, my heart heavy with the weight of her denial. The bet was a distant hum now, drowned out by the roar of my feelings. I didn't care about Jake's money anymore, not really. What I cared about was Claire, and the way she was tearing herself apart trying to reconcile her heart with her past. I kept up my efforts, but softer now, more careful. I'd leave her notes with song lyrics, slip her favorite coffee blend into the pantry, invite her to low-stakes outings like walks along the Charles River. She'd join me sometimes, her silence louder than words, but she was there, and that was enough. One afternoon, we ended up at a bookstore in Harvard Square. Claire wandered to the law section, but I caught her glancing at the queer fiction shelf. I handed her a copy of The Price of Salt, the novel that inspired Carol. "Read it," I said. "No pressure." She took it, her fingers brushing mine, and I felt that spark again. That night, she stayed up late, the glow of her lamp spilling under her door. I knew she was reading. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, during a snowstorm that blanketed Boston in white. We were snowed in, the city quiet under its frozen quilt. Claire was restless, pacing the apartment, her law books untouched. I suggested we bake, something my mom used to do during storms. We made chocolate chip cookies, laughing as flour dusted our clothes. In the warmth of the kitchen, with the oven humming, Claire opened up. "My parents would disown me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. If I was like you." I set down the mixing bowl, my heart aching. "They don't get to decide who you love, Claire. No one does." She looked at me, her eyes searching, and for the first time I saw hope there. "What if I don't know how to do this?" she asked. I stepped closer, wiping flour from her cheek. "You don't have to know. You just have to try." That night we didn't kiss. We didn't need to. We sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the snow fall outside. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, and it felt like a promise. The bet's deadline was 3 months away, but I didn't care. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about her. But the world doesn't let you hide in snowstorms forever. Jake showed up one evening, his grin too wide, his voice too loud. "How's the bet going, Mia?" he asked, oblivious to Claire's presence in the kitchen. Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "What bet?" she demanded. My stomach dropped. I hadn't told her. I couldn't. Jake, realizing his mistake, tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Claire's face hardened, her voice ice. "You're trying to win me? For money?" I tried to explain, but the words tangled. "It started that way, but it's not like that anymore, Claire. I swear." She didn't listen. She grabbed her coat and left, the door slamming behind her. I stood there, the apartment too quiet, my heart in pieces. Jake apologized, but I barely heard him. All I could think about was Claire out in the cold, thinking I'd played her. I spent the next few days trying to reach her. Text calls, nothing. She stayed with a friend, leaving me alone in our apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of our moments. I wrote songs, I sketched her face, I replayed every mistake. The bet had been a spark, but it had burned us both. I didn't care about the money anymore. I just wanted her back. Finally, she came home. It was late, the city humming outside. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice raw. I took a deep breath, laying it all bare, the bet, the money, how it stopped mattering the moment I saw her for who she was. "I love you, Claire," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Not for a bet. For you." She didn't speak. She just looked at me, her eyes searching for truth. Then slowly she stepped forward, and we were kissing again, this time with no fear, no regret, just us. Claire's kiss was a lifeline, pulling me from the wreckage of the bet. But love, I learned, doesn't erase the past. We stood in our apartment, breathless, her hand still on my face, her eyes searching mine. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered, her voice trembling but honest. "Then we'll figure it out together," I said, and for the first time I believed we could. The next few weeks were a tightrope walk. Claire was trying, really trying, but her past clung to her like a shadow. She'd hold my hand under the table at coffee shops, her fingers warm but hesitant, only to pull away if someone looked too long. She'd laugh with me, her smile brighter than ever, but then retreat into silence, her mind wrestling with the weight of her upbringing. I was patient, or at least I tried to be. I'd seen her heart and I wasn't letting go. We started small, rebuilding trust. I took her to queer-friendly Spaces, a bookstore event, a drag show, a picnic with my friends. She was nervous at first, her eyes darting like she expected judgment, but my friends welcomed her, no questions asked. Slowly she relaxed, her laughter mingling with theirs. One night at a lesbian bar in Jamaica Plain, she danced with me, her body close, her smile unguarded. "I didn't know it could feel like this," she said, her voice soft against the music. I kissed her forehead, my heart full. But the bet wasn't gone. Jake, ever the chaos agent, kept texting, asking if I'd sealed the deal. I told him to back off, but his words gnawed at me. The money was still there, a temptation I couldn't fully ignore. I hadn't told Claire the full details, how much the bet was, how close the deadline was. I wanted to protect her, but I was also protecting myself from her reaction. The truth was a landmine and I was tiptoeing around it. One evening Claire found out. We were cleaning the apartment, music blaring, when my phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, her face paling. It was a text from Jake. 1 month left. $200,000 on the line, Mia. Don't choke. She turned to me, her eyes blazing. $200,000? That's what I'm worth to you. Her voice cracked, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. I tried to explain, but she cut me off. You lied, Mia. You let me think this was real. It is real. I shouted, desperate. The bet was stupid, but my feelings aren't. I love you, Claire. She shook her head, tears falling. How am I supposed to believe you? She left again, this time to her room, the door locking behind her. I sank to the floor, my chest tight. I'd lost her and it was my fault. I gave her space, but I didn't give up. I wrote her a letter, pouring out everything, the bet, my fears, my love. I slipped it under her door, hoping she'd read it. Days passed and she stayed distant, her eyes avoiding mine. I kept going to open mics, playing songs about her, hoping she'd show up. She didn't. Then one night she did. I was halfway through a set, my voice raw, when I saw her in the back, her blonde hair catching the dim light. I finished my song, my heart pounding, and stepped off the stage. She met me halfway, her eyes red but steady. I read your letter, she said. I'm scared, Mia. But I don't want to lose you. We didn't kiss, didn't touch. We just stood there, the crowd fading around us, and I knew we weren't done. The bet's deadline came and went. I told Jake to keep his money. He laughed, called me a fool, but I didn't care. Claire was worth more than $200,000, more than any bet. We started over slowly, honestly. She told me about her parents, how she'd called them and told them she was questioning everything. They didn't take it well, but she didn't back down. I'm done living for them, she said, and I saw the strength in her, the woman she was becoming. By spring we were a couple, not perfect but real. We walked along the Charles River, hand in hand, the city blooming around us. Claire was still learning, still scared, but she was mine and I was hers. The bet had started it all, but it was love that kept us going. Spring in Boston was a revelation, and so was Claire. We stood on the banks of the Charles River, the water glinting under the April sun, her hand warm in mine. She'd changed, not just for me, but for herself, and that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. The months after the bet's deadline were a new chapter. Claire was still navigating her identity, but she was braver now. She'd started therapy, working through the guilt and fear her upbringing had carved into her. She'd even joined a queer book club, her copy of The Price of Salt dog-eared and annotated. I watched her bloom, her laughter louder, her eyes brighter. But it wasn't all easy. There were nights when she'd wake up crying, haunted by her parents' voices, by the weight of their disapproval. I'd hold her, whispering that she was enough, that she was everything. I was changing too. The bet had forced me to confront my own flaws, my recklessness, my fear of vulnerability. I'd taken the bet for the money, but also to prove something to myself and to Claire. Now I didn't need to prove anything. I just needed her. One evening we went back to the dive bar where it all started. Jake was there, his grin softer now, almost apologetic. You two look good together, he said, raising his beer. Claire smiled, her hand squeezing mine under the table. We are, she said, and I felt my heart swell. Jake didn't mention the bet, and neither did we. It was a ghost, irrelevant now. Claire's parents were still a wound. She'd written them a letter, coming out fully, but they hadn't responded. They might never understand, she told me one night, her voice steady but sad. But I'm not hiding anymore. I kissed her, proud of her courage, knowing how much it cost her. My own mom, when I told her about Claire, had just laughed and said, "Mija, you always pick the complicated ones." But she sent Claire a care package, coffee, pastels, and a note that said, "Welcome to the family." We moved forward, building a life together. We got a new apartment, one we chose together, with a balcony where we'd sit with coffee and watch the city wake up. I kept playing music, and Claire started coming to every show, her cheers the loudest in the room. She even picked up my guitar one day, fumbling through a chord I'd taught her, her laughter filling the room. The real test came when we went to a pride parade in June. Claire had never been, and I could feel her nerves as we approached the rainbow-streaked crowd. But she held my hand, her grip tight, and when a group of older lesbians waved us over, she smiled and waved back. We danced, we laughed, we kissed under a shower of glitter. "I'm home," she whispered, and I knew she meant it. Looking back, the bet was a mistake, but it was also the spark that lit our fire. It forced us to face ourselves, Claire's fears, my recklessness, and come out stronger. The $200,000 was never mine, but I'd won something better, her. We weren't perfect. We fought, we stumbled, but we always came back to each other. Love, I learned, wasn't about changing someone. It was about seeing them, holding space for them, and growing together. As we stood on our balcony one evening, the city lights sparkling below, Claire turned to me. "I never thought I'd be here," she said, her eyes soft. "With you. Like this." I pulled her close, my lips brushing her forehead. "Me neither," I said. "But I wouldn't trade it for anything." Our story wasn't about the bet anymore. It was about us two women, flawed and fearless, finding each other in a world that tried to keep us apart. And that, I knew, was worth more than any money could buy. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.